So, welcome everyone to the first Zoom meeting recording of Revelation Happens. We've got Dr. Everett Ramsey here. Here, let's just switch over real quick. Dr. Ramsey, welcome.
Yeah.
Paul is the one we talked with last year when we did these videos, and Danny is local in Missouri. And Danny, I don't know what to do about your sound, but you don't show a mic, so you don't have a mic that's showing as being available. So that's the problem, if you can hear it.
Danny's messaging me right now.
Yeah, I see that. His he doesn't show a mic, so whatever. Okay, so Dr. Ramsey, we've been doing some videos for you, and luckily you've been around a long time and you've got a lot of good things to teach us. But when it comes to Revelation, you have your own ideas, and I'm glad that you joined us because what we were teaching last year on Revelation, you're probably not aware of yet if you haven't watched this video. So let me go over and show you what we've been teaching and where it is, and let's just show everyone. So let me switch back to myself. Okay, here's what we did before. This is my channel, angloisrael.com. And my email is david@angloisrael.com. Now, if you just click here, you'll go to my videos, which I've already got pulled up. Rev 9 video. And down here, if you scroll down, we'll come back to this, but I have a lot of teachings here, about 140 something videos. Oh, I guess Danny left and came back. Okay, so here's where most of my videos are. Now, for Paul's, we did he put these on a playlist, so you'll be able to find his videos real easy. This is his channel, Truth with Christ on YouTube. This is his video selection. Now, if you go over here to his playlist, click on his playlist, it'll bring that up, and then you scroll down, and ours is actually the first, I guess that was that the first playlist you did? Well, it's at the bottom, at any rate. So if you click on the playlist on his channel, it'll come up here on the right side. He's just labeled them A1, A2, A3 for Anglo-Israel, and real easy to see. So we did 6 videos in order there, and at some point, I think probably on the 4th one was where we came up and started doing OBS. So there's Paul. He used to look real nice with his coat and all that. All right. Yeah. So at any rate, I pulled those up. Those are about 10.5 hours of video. So we actually did quite a bit. And what we started with is he called it the Biblical Cross Correlation Intro to the 12 Tribes. We basically showed in the background, we started out showing how Christ could be taught from Genesis 15:1 is Christ the shield, and then we got into the background of what Christ the rock, Christ the shield, and Christ the scepter in Genesis could all be easily proven up. And then we tied that back to Jacob's pillar stone, where Jacob had the vision of the ladder to heaven, and then he consecrated the stone, Jacob's pillar stone. That became the idea of Christ the rock, the spiritual rock, was that actual pillar stone from back then. In Genesis, and then later on when he struggled with the angel, we proved up the point that angel he was fighting with or struggling with was Christ. So we went through all those connections in Genesis. A lot of people miss that, and you can easily show because that angel called himself God. So I said, well, when an angel calls himself God, that's Christ. So we went through that, went through my teaching of Christ the rock. I've got a whole teaching on that. And by the way, that is on my channel. If you scroll down my channel, you'll see a whole, at the very bottom. I've got about 100, like I said, about 146 videos on here. And if you get down near the bottom, you'll find Christ the rock, Abraham established, Christ the heir of Abraham, and one of these says Christ the rock. It's down here near the bottom. At any rate, Jacob's pillar stone. Here's Jacob's pillar stone. Those not worthy. A timeline. So I've got all these handwritten charts that I did 5 years ago. Now it seems that most of this information that I've written out is going to be very relevant for what's going on today. So, we'll end that. Well, let's go over to Dr. Ramsey's channel real quick. Here's where he's putting up current videos. This is what his channel looks like. It's called just Dr. Everett Ramsey on YouTube. And we do a weekly Zoom meeting. This is our here's our first Zoom meeting and our second Zoom meeting, so we're just now getting up on Zoom and starting to put his teachings on here. But he has some conference videos and so forth that he's done here in Branson. So he's got quite a bit up here, pretty good. And tell us a little bit about your background, Dr. Ramsey.
Well, I hate to talk about my background. It's you know, you go to school and all those things, but you find out that you learn the Bible by reading and experience. But I was called to the ministry at 16. I've been preaching somewhere all the time since that time. And of course, my ministry really got its growth in the 80s, 79, 86 through 86, when we had a Christian school in Nebraska that got padlocked by the state and threw me and some of the elders in jail. And eventually we won that battle, and the Lord gave us a great victory. And out of that, I became educated, and I was introduced to the gospel of the kingdom and the Israel message, which we have today, the Christian Israel message, which we have today. As far as degrees, I've got more than I want to talk about, but that doesn't make me better than anybody else. It doesn't make me as good as some. So I'm glad to be here. I'm going to always preach and teach. I believe we're in a very critical time. I'm on here because I have to tell you that I am not a scholar of Revelation. I've studied it and tried to learn it, and I'm here to learn as well as to contribute what I can.
All right, well, thanks. By the way, let's just switch back over here real quick, and I'll show you, because I've got his last one. This is the one we just posted from this week, and here's what it looks like in Zoom. So at some point here, I actually went to a full screen. There I go. I got a full screen. It says my internet connection is a little unstable. But anyway, if you want to find it, his channel is just Dr. Everett Ramsey on YouTube. So, all right, let's go over to Danny real quick. Danny was asking me about a video channel. Can we hear you now, Danny? Can you hear us?
You could just Google godscovenantpeople.com.
Yes. We bought a referring domain. So if you if you just go to godscovenantpeople.com, just type that into your browser, and it goes directly to his YouTube channel, and he also has a website. Danny, can you hear us? Danny?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right, good.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad you got in, and you got some good video, and your sound actually sounds pretty good. All right, now we're going to go back to Paul here for a second. All right, Paul. Now, you remember all the time we spent on Revelation, and maybe you didn't understand all the things we were doing, but basically I had all these charts pulled up on my website, and we were teaching off of mostly PDFs, but also charts, and I'm going to show these charts here in a minute because I've actually just got them here on my website. We were teaching off PDFs, so where we started was the, I was trying to think, which PDF did we start with? Do you recall?
Just a quick comment, David.
Go ahead.
Just a quick.
Go ahead.
I don't recall, but I do recall that Danny also has a playlist on the Truth Channel just for the listeners. You can go to DS, that Danny won't mention his last name here, but his last name starts with S. He has a playlist on the Truth Channel. Just wanted to make everybody aware of that.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I was trying to think. We didn't start with Jews for Gentiles, and the one I pulled up was not the one that we started with. But at any rate, our charts here, let's just start with New Testament quotes in order. And I know we talked about quotes, and that's a important thing. So let's go over to that.
That may be the one we started with, David.
Yeah, I don't think so, but at any rate, I had been teaching some videos, about 56 videos on the New Testament quotes, and I pointed out that there were 300 quotes in the New Testament, and that a lot of those quotes, and here I've got them pulled up here, I'm sure y'all can see them just fine here. In fact, I could make that a little bit bigger. Alright, so here I've got them in the New Testament order, and then I've got them in Old Testament order. And one of the things I pointed out in here is that there's 300 quotes from the New Testament back to the Old Testament. And these apostles did not know all of this stuff. These are things that they learned from Christ, because I pointed out in Luke 24:44 that Christ said that this was after, or let's put it this way, during the 40 years after his death and resurrection, he was teaching the apostles, he said, from Moses, the prophets, and Psalms. And he said he was teaching everything about himself from Moses, the prophets, and Psalms. Well, these are the things that he was teaching. These things that they quoted were things that they were taught, in that last 40 days, but during the whole time they knew him, of course. They were learning these things from Christ. So I pointed out that most of what's in these quotes is actually prophecies from the Old Testament about Christ, and they go all the way back to Genesis. So the way I pulled that up for Genesis is in this Old Testament quotes in order. So when you go back in the reverse order, then you have the first quote, which is from Genesis, which is Hebrews 4:4. So here, let's take a look at this real quick. Here's a key thing. The Abrahamic Covenant from Genesis 12:1 and 12:3 is actually quoted 3 times from the New Testament. Now, if you go over here to Acts, excuse me, Acts 7:3, that's part of Stephen's defense, where he's talking about the Abrahamic Covenant, and then in Acts 3:25, well, all in Acts, and you have Paul, and you have Peter, and everybody speaking in Acts, and they're referring back to this Abrahamic Covenant. So the point is that they're basically talking about prophecies. The Abrahamic Covenant was a prophecy, and Revelation is the end of the Abrahamic Covenant, that prophecy. And also, though, in Genesis 15, you notice you have these, this is a prophecy, 15:13 here, which goes to Acts again, is a prophecy of the 430 years later, as Paul said in Galatians 3:16. He said, Christ was promised first, the law came 430 years later, and here's the prophecy right here, is a quote from Romans 4:18. So a lot of this stuff in the New Testament is... Go ahead. Go ahead.
Is this on a website that is what you're showing on the screen?
Yeah, it's on
what
my...
you're showing, David, is kind of blurry to us.
Is that a little blurry? I can make it a little bigger. How about that?
It's just blurry.
All right, well, the recording...
Where can I find it so I can go?
The recording should be good. Yeah, this is on my website. If we go over to it, it's called angloisrael.com. Yeah, I think you missed that because you, when we first started with that, you kind of, your internet connection was having a problem. It's angloisrael.com.
Okay.
And when you scroll down, actually I've got some important stuff here at the top about these viruses, because we're being lied to about, viruses. Well, we healed the Ebola virus a few years back, the pandemic, and that was, a bioweapon. It was healed with ozone. I've got everything you need to know about that right here. So why don't we just use ozone to heal the current one? Well, that would be the logical thing. And then I've got things here about Mount Sinai. So the first organized tour to Mount Sinai. Yeah, that's that. I see that's kind of messing up in the recording. It's because I've got probably that green screen on this. I'm going to have to deal with that and figure out how to switch between the green screen. Here's the chart. So you just scroll down. You get the free Bible charts. I've got all these, everything we were teaching from, actually, me and Paul. Everything's right here. These are PDFs at the top, and then you see their JPEGs down below. And I was going to switch over to some of these JPEGs so you can see we've got all this laid out, and we're going to kind of use these charts. So these charts took me about, a good 8 years to draw out by hand. And then I've got Pastor Everett's book here, but for some reason our picture of his book is not coming out. But I've got the Dr. Everett Ramsey right here. I think you can see that, the ISBN number. So he's got a new book. At any rate, he actually, if you go to his video, you can see we did a background. Let me just pull that up real quick. This background is a video we did for Ramsey, and we overlaid his book on it. So when it comes up, well, I'm probably using a little bit too much. Oh, the book actually was just the. Sorry, that's not going to work. At any rate. Yeah, I've got the pictures,
David,
whatever. Go ahead.
Is there an area I could put a link? Because then I could have Danny and Pastor Ramsey get your document.
In the chat, if you switch over to the chat, you can throw it over in the chat.
Okay, here we go.
I've got it, Paul. I found it on the internet.
But of course, the reason I wanted to pull it up in the video like this was that so everybody would just be able to, because if you come over here to angleisrael.com, you'll see the link to our videos, the link to Pastor Everett's. We also have yours on here, by the way. Let's just go down because we almost got to yours. They're right down here. There it is. You see that? So your playlist, in other words, Paul. If they click on this, it'll go to your playlist. And these are the videos we did. And that I mentioned some of that on here. In fact, I've got a whole bunch of information, just like here, about the Christ the Prophet or the Messiah, which is the two names we knew Christ by right there in John. And I said, well, they were expecting me. It was a, I said, redemption is the faith of Abraham, as Paul states in Galatians 3:16. Through the whole end of that chapter, really, that whole argument there that he's Paul is saying that this faith, which people call faith in God, was actually faith in redemption of Christ. Abraham knew about Christ, and we can prove that. It was Christ the shield. And of course, it was Melchizedek in chapter 14 in Genesis. Genesis chapter 14, he's just called Melchizedek, and that's repeated over in Hebrews, so everybody knows that. But to get back to what we started with, we had started pointing out that the reason we have all this information in the New Testament and all these quotes is because this is what Christ was teaching, just like he said. There's multiple mentions of what he said there. In Luke 24:44, that's actually mentioned about 120 times, I think. And again, I have charts that we're going to go through to kind of see all that. So my charts are going to be, here let's just look at one. Let's start with the Abrahamic Covenant, for example. Alright, so this is what they look like. Oh, alright. Alright, so here's my chart on the Abrahamic Covenant. And I'm sure y'all can see that pretty good. Now we're already through our 30 minutes, so we've done about as much as we're going to do here, but I'm going to give us an extra 10 minutes, and then in 10 minutes this is going to cut us off. Is there anything you guys, let's go ahead and switch over to you guys and see if there's anything I want to talk about real quick, because we only got 10 more minutes. Any questions?
I would ask, you've given me a couple of times, David, where you think we are in Revelation as to chapter and verse. I'd like to know where that is. I'm going to mark it and do some study on it.
Yeah, well, where I think we're at right now is what's show, and these things, these verses are not in exact order. So chapter 12 of Revelation is actually about chapter 11, which is the two witnesses. So we're going to connect the two witnesses, which is really the key, is this prophecy from Genesis 48, which me and Paul went through before. It's about Ephraim and Manasseh, where they were given this power with God that was originally given to Jacob. then Jacob gave that power with God to Ephraim and Manasseh to be over the rest of the 12 tribes. And then that's confirmed again in Genesis 49. If you look at through all the blessings in Genesis 49 to each tribe, you see that really Joseph is the only one that's actually a real blessing, and he's the one that's given this stone. Well, it usually says stone. Now, each Bible will say it differently, but it's 49:24 in Genesis. You'll see he's given this, mine says stone. Each one will say it slightly different. But that's where Christ is basically transferred. That's Christ the rock, but from Genesis 15:1, it's Christ the shield. And then we can see Christ all the way through to Jacob's pillar stone. We can see the angel is Christ, and then the angel that struggles with Jacob is Christ. And then Jacob's name's changed to Israel, which means ruling with God or power with God, depending on which verse you're looking at. And then that power with God is transferred to Ephraim and Manasseh. But when you get to Revelation 12, that's, well, we call it symbology, and Revelation 12 connects back to Joseph's vision, which is, what is that, Genesis 37:9, I think, his second vision. I'm just recalling that from memory. And Jacob says, would me and your mother bow, and your brothers bow to you? That was the second vision. The first vision was that his brothers would bow to him, which they did later in Egypt. The second vision was about the sun and the moon and the stars. That's Genesis 37:9, as I recall. And if you look at that, he said, would we bow to you? Well, so in Revelation 12, it starts out the woman with the crown of 12 stars. That's Sarah, because Sarah had this prophecy from, I think it's chapter... well, she has a couple prophecies there in Genesis, so we've got those on our chart. But the point is, it's Sarah in chapter 12. We can show, if you go to 12:17 of Revelation, it's her children, in other words, who are following God's law and teaching the message of Christ. And I said to Paul a few times, what would be the blessing back here in Genesis 48, it's in 35:11 of Genesis, and it's also in chapter 48, what would be the blessing of this great nation and this commonwealth of nations if these offspring of these Israelites, in other words, would not know Christ? I mean, what kind of blessing would it be for them to be a great nation that did not know Christ? Or a commonwealth of nations who did not know Christ? Of course they're going to know Christ. So Jacob taught him about Christ. Whatever name he used Jehovah, or he used whatever. Paul can maybe come up with some ideas about what name he might have called. We say Lord, but he used I am, or he used whatever. So he used Christ the shield, in other words, Christ the rock, or he used Melchizedek, or whatever name he used for this Redeemer. He knew about the Redeemer, that was the point. Abraham knew about the Redeemer, Isaac knew about the Redeemer, that knowledge was passed to Jacob. Jacob saw those visions, he understood it, and then he passed that to Joseph, to his two children, Ephraim and Manasseh. And then that accumulates in 49:24, where that prophecy is specifically given to Joseph. And that's what we see in Revelation. So Revelation is just a fulfillment of the Abrahamic Covenant, which was expanded piece by piece by piece as you go through Genesis. You can see the expansion. We've got it all laid out with the cross references. And then we can see it in Exodus, we can see it in Isaiah, we can see it in Jeremiah, and so on and so on. So we're going to show that progression from Genesis all the way to Revelation. We're going to show the key verses. We're not, there's tons of stuff which we can spend days on, but we're going to show all the key verses that tie specifically to Revelation, tie that, and then we're going to tie all of Revelation together, which I've already done. So you can see that in Revelation, for sure, it's all about the 12 tribes, and it's all about those prophecies. And we're going to show that. And that's what I needed teachers for, so that y'all can ask questions, and agree or disagree, or maybe hopefully you're going to see other things. Because I know when you get people together, everybody has their views and they see other things that other people don't see. So it's really good when you get everybody together and they're all on the same page and sharing information. So that's why I invited everybody. So I hope I hope at least the 4 of us, if not more, come in and share their thoughts on this. And then when they see these videos, same thing. You got any ideas you want to share, Danny?
I think the woman that's in this passage that it's talking about is the daughter of Zion, which is alluded to in Jeremiah 6:2. It says, "I have likened the daughter of Zion to a comely and delicate woman."
Right.
And of course, I agree completely with you that it's talking about the 12 stars of the 12
right.
children of Israel.
Right. Yeah,
I would
and
like to say one thing, and I would like to say one thing, and I would really like to discuss this with you.
okay.
I am, in my own mind, positive that we are between the 5th and 6th events in the book of Revelations. And I have taught this for at least 10 years, that the next great event that we would experience would be the economic collapse, quickly followed by war.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to get hit with the second punch very quickly. The first 4 events in Revelation are historical. They have ridden over us ever since they were written in the book of the law in Leviticus 26.
All right. Well, I've covered I've covered the idea that all these are going to happen in rapid succession, and that the Zechariah 5 actually is the connection to nuclear war, and we'll get into all that. So we'll have a good discussion. Doesn't matter. We all think things different, but we're getting ready to end this because they're going to kick us off here at our 40-minute limit. So, Paul, what do you will you have anything to add?
Just on the name should be Ajay, Asher, Ajay in the Paleo-Phoenician. That is what we translate to I am that I am. Ajay, Asher, Ajay, and that means I am J, or I am Jesus. You don't hear that classically taught.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. You went through a lot of that information. That's going to be good. We got a minute left, so let's go ahead and wrap up. Dr. Ramsey, do you?
More time.
Well, we can buy for $150 a year. I can simply sign up, and then we can go 24 hours and record. So right now we're just doing the free 40 minutes. So it's giving us a free 40 minutes. But if you're only 2 people, apparently there's not a limit. But once you get to 3, then it kicks you down to a 40-minute limit. So we're on that. We got less than a minute. Go ahead, Dr. Ramsey. You got anything to add?
No, I'm still looking for the answer to the question I asked about how the verse that tells you where we're in the middle, almost in the middle of the week of the tribulation. That's what
Revelation 13.
Okay.
Revelation 13.
Well, our next show is going to be on Thursday, so 2 days away, and we can let's just pick up on that when we come back. How about that?
All right.
All right, Bob. Appreciate all y'all coming. This is what we got today, and if we do a different set, of course, Paul's only got so much time to spend with